Good morning. It is Friday, September the 20th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. I'm Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, because I'm the only one who makes the presumption for the status quo. This is opposed to Rush Limbaugh, who is not a conservative, but a reactionary traditionalist. My podcast is about being a true conservative and using true conservatism to beat the left each and every day. My podcast is made possible by Spreaker.com. It can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. My email address is storytimes@hotmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Ronald Hardgrove and on Facebook at The Drill. I started my socio-political odyssey as a conservative Republican, then became a card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party, and now I am a registered independent and true conservative. I was taught by the left how to dress, how to act, what to take seriously, and who to associate with. When I decided to vote Republican, I thought that I could act like a liberal, but vote conservative and still consider myself a conservative. I was wrong. Whenever I engaged a liberal in debate, I couldn't win. I couldn't win because I couldn't be taken seriously and because I didn't understand the debate dynamic between left and right. I talked conservative, but I acted left. I used lefty lingo, I dressed like the left, and I engaged in petty vice and associated with people who engaged in vice. People who used drugs, gambled, consorted with prostitutes, stole, and cheated. I failed to recognize that the debate dynamic was between psychology, things that are imaginary, and philosophy, things that are real. It was no wonder that the people around me didn't take me seriously. So I realized that defeating the liberals and socialists starts by getting my act together, by not only voting conservative, but talking, dressing, and acting conservative. In other words, by living conservative. By refusing to associate with common criminals and ne'er-do-wells, by being aware of and resisting left-wing counterculture, and by using my intellect to defeat psychological bullying and intimidation. By becoming a true conservative, I will not only win, I will never lose. And the purpose of my podcast is to share with my audience the lessons I learned on how to defeat the left each and every day. Today, I will celebrate the Trump administration's recent Supreme Court victory. I will also elaborate on the debate dynamic of mass murders. I will explain why ignoring the Democrat Party debate is truly conservative, and read from Chapter 4 of the book A False Kind of Christianity by Dan Jensen, when I come back. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Celebrate, celebrate. The Trump administration has another victory to celebrate, and conservatives have another victory to celebrate. The Supreme Court, on an 8-2 decision, has overruled a temporary restraining order that prevented the administration from enacting an executive order which will force asylum seekers to apply for asylum in Mexico first, before applying for asylum in the United States. This ruling will allow the federal government to exercise more control over the border. And it is a good decision because it is realistic and because it is realistic. And hooray for the Trump administration. When I come back, the psychology of mass murders. Thank you. Welcome back. Make no mistake, mass murders are the consequence of left-wing counterculture. The dynamic between the right and the left is that the left, every time there's a mass murder, the left is able to successfully put the right on defensive. The right is always then, basically the argument goes, we have too many guns on our streets, and the right says, oops, Second Amendment. And while Second Amendment is true, it is a weak argument because it is intellectually and psychologically unsatisfying. The problem with the right is that they need to go on offense. They need to take a fresh look at this particular debate. Now, the left encourages people to act first and think later, believe that might makes right and the ends justify the means, both wrong, and to do it if it feels good, also wrong. Also, they say if it feels good, not only if it feels good, do it, but that the meaning of life is to have fun, and that the way to have fun is to act impulsively. Despite all of these mistakes, it seems that the left is winning on the issue of gun control. And the reason they seem to be winning is because mass murder lends itself to the Democrat method of communication, storytelling, and verbal picture painting. Conservatives need a response that is both intellectually and psychologically satisfying. The right way to respond to the left's demagoguery is by telling stories, painting pictures, and then following up with facts and figures. The stories that conservatives would tell and the pictures that they would display would be stories and pictures of heroism, of heroic victims and first responders. These stories and pictures could be immediately supplemented by proposals for increases in supply and equipment for victims and first responders. It's also the thing that conservatives need to do is to point to American counterculture as the true culprit for mass murders. The promotion of having fun, of acting impulsively, to act first and think later, that the left promotes. Everybody that is engaged in mass murder, if you look at them, none of them have tears streaming down their face. They don't appear to be in anguish. They're not doing this because they think they're doing something for the greater good. They are, in effect, having fun. This is the way they get their rocks off, so to speak. And they do this because, again, the left tells them this is the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to have fun. The way to have fun is to act impulsively. If you get the idea that it would be really fun to go out and kill my classmates, then you should go do it. Pick up a gun and go kill the classmates. So this type of attitude, or cultural attitude, has to be challenged by the right. And to explain to people and emphasize and re-emphasize that the meaning of life is the pursuit of happiness, but not just psychological happiness, but moral happiness as well. Pursuing what Aristotle referred to as the golden means, and trying to be the best person you possibly can. And that the objective, and pointing out that the idea that life is all about having fun is shallow, ridiculous, and wrong. All of this is conservative for several reasons. It tells the truth, demonstrates sympathy and empathy, and controls the dialogue/narrative. And when I come back, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Democrat Party debate. Thank you very much. I ignored the Democrat Party debate because any party that deliberately blurs the line between metaphysical and man-made reality doesn't deserve to be taken seriously. Any party that approximates, guesses, suggests, and substitutes emotional vibrations for good judgment isn't worth listening to. Any party that bullies and intimidates instead of being persuasive doesn't deserve respect. And finally, any party that attempts to obliterate ugliness by denying beauty doesn't deserve to be on display. And when I come back, I'm going to be reading Chapter 4 of the book, A False Kind of Christianity by Dan Jensen. Thank you very much, and welcome back. And I am going to be reading from Chapter 4 from the book, A False Kind of Christianity by Dan Jensen. And when we left this book off, he was basically making the point that even Christianity, our religion, has been infiltrated and subverted by the left. And they've brought their crappy philosophy to Christianity and are acting in ways that are not just subversive, but heretical as well. And so this particular chapter, he's going into some of the foundations for why it is that he, to justify or to create the foundation for his reasoning. That's the word I'm looking for. And so he's starting with philosophy. And the things that he's touching on in this chapter are absolutely essential, absolutely vital. When you listen to Rush Limbaugh, all you hear is shallow. Everything is shallow. Everything is basically nothing more than a power struggle, and it's not true. There's a hell of a lot more to life and to what's going on in life than just political power struggles. So now, chapter 4, and this is a long chapter. I'm going to be taking this. He divides it up into various sections, and I'm going to take it section by section. Chapter 4, philosophy. What is philosophy? The term philosophy means love of wisdom. And this is important as an aside here, because you'll hear people talk about philosophies as if there were different philosophies. Kant's philosophy, Hegel's philosophy, Ayn Rand's philosophy. Baloney. It means the love of wisdom. There's only one philosophy. There are philosophical theories, but not different philosophies. As a broader academic subject, back to the book, as a broader academic subject, it refers to the study of topics that form the foundation for all further knowledge. Hence, philosophy is extremely important. Many philosophers break down the subject differently, but there's a basic agreement that it can be broken down into 3 to 5 key categories. These are epistemology, logic, metaphysics, ethics, and aesthetics. Many place logic within epistemology, and many place aesthetics within ethics, or what is known as axiology, the study of value. I personally believe that a fourfold division of epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, and aesthetics, with logic as a subtopic under epistemology, is best. Epistemology refers to the study of how we acquire knowledge. Metaphysics is the study of being or existence. Ethics is the study of right and wrong. Aesthetics is the study of art or beauty. And logic deals with how we can test assertions for their accuracy. As you can see, philosophy primarily deals with the things that we instinctively know are true apart from further investigation. This is why it is so foundational. The basic truths that we discuss and analyze in philosophy are known as the first principles of knowledge. Precisely because that is where they are, I will discuss these first principles in our next section. But for now, I want to make clear to the reader what a wonderful and yet treacherous subject philosophy is. We cannot truly test our beliefs or the beliefs of others without getting at least a little philosophical. For that reason, philosophy is great and most necessary. But philosophy is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, of all subjects. Philosophy is chock full of dead ends, mysteries, difficulties, nuance, complexities, and just plain gray areas. This gives skeptics endless amounts of fodder for questioning just about everything. I do not have answers to all of these problems, not even close. No one does. But what you must remember if you read any critiques of what I write in this section on philosophy, or any critique of sound Christian philosophy, it is that just because we cannot solve all mysteries, this does not mean that what we instinctively know to be true beyond all doubt is actually in question. For example, there are huge problems with any ethical statement, giant problems. I, along with anyone engaging in knowledgeable philosophy, could spend pages and pages writing about all the deep and major philosophical conundrums that attend any ethical claim. But just because we cannot answer all of these mysteries, does this mean that the rape of a child is any less immoral? Of course not. No matter what anyone says, we all know deep down, beyond doubt, that this is a heinous sin. That truth is a first principle of knowledge falling under the rubric of ethics. It is not in need of further proof. If it is self-proving, or more traditional philosophical language, it is self-evident. Or, as an aside, I would say, the word he's groping for here is axiomatic. Back to the book. First principles of knowledge. There are actually quite a few first principles of knowledge. Most of them we utilize all the time without realizing it. It is well beyond the scope of this work to detail all of these first principles. I will simply be discussing here the most basic ones that are necessary for proving or disproving any worldview. Before diving right in, I must briefly discuss how we first receive first principles. Some early philosophers did not think through this question very carefully and came up with the notion that the ideas of these first principles are planted within us from birth, before birth, or sometime shortly after. This doctrine was known as the doctrine of innate ideas. But clearly babies do not have these innate ideas. It is, in fact, common sense, first principle, that they do not. This fact led more sound philosophers to posit the doctrine known as innate knowledge, which was far sounder. The two concepts may sound almost identical, and indeed the term innate knowledge is misleading, but the two notions are actually quite different. The doctrine of innate knowledge says that our minds have been created in such a way that they can acquire and attain knowledge as we experience reality, and that eventually we reach a point where our minds can test all the bits of information we have gained through experience. At that point, we would instinctively know that certain things are true. And from these first principles, we can then deduce further conclusions and also investigate the world around us, using these first principles and the inferences drawn from them to come to even more conclusions. It is very difficult to tell at what stage of development we gain these instincts, as we know that children primarily just accept what is told them by the authorities that surround them. It would seem that the best answer to this question is that we do not receive all of these instincts at once, that everyone is different in this development, but that all those without cognitive deficiencies do eventually receive all of these instincts, even if it is very rare for people to fully think through them. And by receive, I do not mean that the idea pops into someone's head at some point in their early development. That would reek of the doctrine of innate ideas. It is not, therefore, as if at about 12 a teenager has the idea murder is wrong pop into his head or his or her head. What it does mean is that most children believe that murder is wrong because that is what parents, relatives, teachers, and religious authorities have told them. But at some point, a young individual instinctively and truly knows that murder is wrong because this instinct has been awakened. Most are not aware of these instincts being awakened within them, but if they do take the time to think about these things, as all teenagers do to some extent, they begin to be more aware of these instincts. The big problem, of course, is the fact that humans are intellectually lazy and sinful. We do not want to think through things very carefully, and for a whole assortment of reasons, we do not want certain things to be true or untrue. Therefore, we often, many times, quite unknowingly, refuse to abide by these first principles. Our beliefs are an ugly amalgam of some first principles, some erroneous things taught by our upbringing and culture, and some things we just want to believe or not believe for various reasons. However, it is possible to overcome this if we press in and really think through what we instinctively know deep down to be true beyond doubt, if we are willing to truly look at things with an open mind. With all that said, we can now begin to look at some of the first principles of knowledge. The reader will notice that some of these fall under epistemology, some under metaphysics, some under ethics, and some under aesthetics. If this were a work purely on philosophy, I would separate each of these more carefully and give intricate treatments of each of the major subsections of philosophy. But that's not necessary for our purposes here. There are 10 overarching areas that I will be detailing as far as the pertinent first principles for this work are concerned. They are the basics of truth, the adequacy of human language, the law of non-contradiction, the law of causality, the basic reliability of sense perception, the basics of deduction, the basics of empirical investigation, the basics of right and wrong, the basics of greater and lesser, and the existence of God. I will detail each of them in turn. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave this at this particular point. And next time that we pick this up, we will be discussing or reading, I'll be reading the basics of truth. So, who are the true conservatives? The true conservative is the person that understands that conservatism is not just political but cultural as well. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He is open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn and correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. And that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.